Imagine this. You get a raise. Not a small one, a real one, the kind you worked toward for 2 years. And for about 3 weeks, maybe a month, something feels different, a little lighter, a little more room to breathe. Then, almost without noticing it, that feeling fades. The account doesn't look that different. The anxiety about money doesn't really go away. Life just costs what it costs, and somehow it costs exactly as much as you make. Most people assume this is a discipline problem. They tell themselves they need to be more careful, more intentional, more consistent. But here is what's strange. Some of the most financially disciplined people in America, people who track their spending, people who have read the books, people who genuinely try, feel this exact same way. So maybe the problem isn't discipline. Maybe it's the system they're inside. Let's sit with this for a moment, because it deserves more than a quick answer. Across the United States, there are millions of households earning what would have been considered a very comfortable income 20 or 30 years ago. $60,000 a year, 80, 100, sometimes more. And a large percentage of them describe their financial situation the same way. Tight. Not desperate, not underwater, just tight. Like there's never quite enough margin. Like one unexpected expense, a car repair, a medical bill, a flight home for a family emergency, lands differently than it should. This isn't about poverty. That's a different and deeply serious conversation. This is about something more specific, the quiet financial pressure that lives inside households that are, by any reasonable measure, doing okay. They have jobs, they have benefits, they might even have some money in a 401k. But the feeling of financial ease, the feeling that money is working for them instead of against them, never quite arrives. And the default explanation is always the same. You're just not managing it well enough. You need a better budget. You need more discipline. You need to cut something. That explanation isn't wrong exactly, but it's incomplete. And incomplete explanations produce incomplete results. Here's what makes this genuinely disorienting. The people who feel this way are not reckless. They are not spending money they don't have on things they don't care about. They are making reasonable decisions, one at a time, that individually make complete sense. You earn more, so you move to a safer neighborhood. That's reasonable. You earn more, so you buy a more reliable car. That's reasonable. You earn more, so you take one real vacation because your family has worked hard and deserves it. That's reasonable. None of these decisions are wrong. But something about the accumulation of reasonable decisions produces an unreasonable result, the feeling of being financially stuck at every income level. That's the part that's hard to explain, and it's the part that makes people blame themselves when they probably shouldn't. Because when you're making individually sensible choices and the outcome is still financial tightness, the problem probably isn't your judgment. The problem is the pattern underneath the judgment, a pattern most people can't see because they're inside it. There is a financial dynamic that works quietly in the background of most American households. It doesn't require bad decisions to activate. It doesn't require carelessness. It runs on something much more ordinary than that. It runs on the very natural, very human tendency to adjust. When income is low, people build a life around what they can afford. Constraints shape everything: the apartment, the car, the groceries, the social life, all calibrated to a number. Then the income rises, and slowly, not all at once, but gradually, the life recalibrates. The apartment gets a little bigger, the car gets a little newer, the dinners out become more frequent, the vacations become more expected, the standards across dozens of categories quietly move up. None of this is greed. Most of it doesn't even feel like a choice. It feels like a reward. It feels like arriving. It feels like this is simply what a person at this income level does. And that's exactly how the pattern sustains itself. Because as the standard of living rises to meet income, the gap between income and expense, the gap where financial progress actually happens, stays thin or disappears entirely. So more money comes in and more money leaves. Not because the person is irresponsible, because their entire sense of what is normal has expanded at the same pace as their paycheck. The most common advice for this situation is simple. Track your spending and cut what's unnecessary. It's logical. It's clear. On paper, it works. But here's where it runs into a wall. When your lifestyle has gradually expanded over 2 or 3 or 10 years, the expansion doesn't feel like excess. It feels like baseline. It feels like what your life simply is now. Asking someone to cut back from their current standard of living doesn't feel like financial optimization to them. It feels like regression. It feels like punishment for earning more. And so most people make small adjustments. They cut the obvious things. They cancel one subscription, make coffee at home for a few weeks, feel virtuous about it. But the structural expenses, the apartment, the car payment, the private school tuition, the neighborhood, the social circle that expects a certain kind of participation, those don't move because those are load-bearing parts of their identity and their daily life. You cannot spreadsheet your way out of a life you've built. That's not a criticism. It's just an accurate description of how this works. The advice isn't bad. The issue is that it treats a systems problem like a math problem, and those are not the same problem. Because their entire sense of what is normal has expanded at the same pace as their paycheck.
Let's look at this from a slightly different angle. There's a version of this pattern that plays out not just in spending, but in expectations. When income rises, something else rises alongside it, the sense of what a person deserves. Not in an arrogant way, in a very ordinary, very American way. A household earning $40,000 a year in their late 20s thinks about money differently than the same household earning $90,000 in their late 30s. And that shift in thinking is not just about what they can afford, it's about what feels appropriate. The apartment they would have been happy with at 28 feels inadequate at 38. The vacation they would have been grateful for early in their career feels like a minimum standard now. And the financial system around them encourages this. Advertising, social environments, mortgage lenders, car dealerships, every structure in the consumer economy is calibrated to help people spend exactly as much as they earn and usually a little more. This is not a conspiracy. It is simply how the incentives are arranged. The result is a quiet escalation that never announces itself. There's no single moment where someone decides to expand their lifestyle. It just happens, year by year, category by category. And the financial gap, the gap that, if protected, would actually build something over time, never widens. Most people spend their entire working lives inside this pattern without recognizing it as a pattern. They think the problem is this month's budget. The actual problem is the 10-year arc they never stepped back to see. Here's the shift that matters. The question most people ask is, where did my money go this month? That's a reasonable question, but it's the wrong unit of analysis. The more accurate question, and the harder one, is this. As my income has grown, has my financial gap grown with it? Or has my lifestyle simply expanded to consume whatever became available? Because income growing is not the same as wealth building. The two can happen at the same time, but they don't happen automatically. Wealth is what's left after income meets life. And when life expands to meet income on a one-to-one basis, nothing is left. Not because of failure, because of a pattern that runs quietly, consistently, and almost invisibly underneath every individual spending decision. Seeing that pattern doesn't immediately fix anything, but it changes the frame. And a changed frame is actually the beginning of something different. When this pattern becomes visible, really visible, not just intellectually acknowledged, a few things tend to shift. Not behaviors, not yet. Something more fundamental. The question changes.
Instead of asking how to spend less, a person starts asking a different question. At what point did my standard of living stop being a choice and start being an assumption? That question doesn't have a quick answer, but sitting with it tends to reveal something. Most people, when they examine their financial lives honestly, can identify a handful of expansions that happened not because they decided to expand, but because expansion was available. The raise came, the option appeared, they took it. Not out of recklessness, out of the very normal human tendency to fill available space. Understanding that doesn't produce guilt, it produces clarity. And clarity about a system you're inside is the only real foundation for doing anything differently. The feeling of financial tightness at a comfortable income is one of the quietest forms of financial confusion in America. It is common enough to be almost universal and misunderstood enough that most people respond to it the wrong way, by trying harder within a system that effort alone cannot change. The system isn't malicious, it's just invisible. And most things that run our lives invisibly are worth at least one honest look. That's what this channel is here to do. Not to give you steps, not to hand you a plan, just to slow down long enough to actually see what's there. If this named something you've felt but never been able to explain, sit with that for a while. That clarity has value, even before anything changes.